Welcome everybody. And as I stated a few minutes ago, we're gonna get started here very shortly. Let a couple people log in. We have some of the students from our My Path, My Future summer camp that should be here. I think they're logging in right now. This is a lecture on modifications and accommodations in college. Again, our format is typically that we do 15 minutes on the topic, and then we do another 15 minutes question and answer. We record the first 15 minutes for the topic presentation. We do not record the individual questions, and folks will not show up on the video at all until we stop that so that we can then ask questions. After the first 15-minute lecture, second 15-minute questions, we will have another 15 minutes for people to share events in their communities and such, and ask other questions about other topics that they have. So we'll get started. I think everyone looks like they've logged in from what I can see. Well, actually, let me wait one more second and let you know, yeah, we've had a great summer camp. We've had the students that are there today are a little bit older, and we got reined into the building, but we had a wonderful talk about advocacy, and I want to thank Ashley Fairbanks for being there to speak to us today. It was fantastic. I don't think Ashley's on now. I don't know if she could have made it in home in time, but importantly, it was fun, fantastic having you there telling us about the things that she needed help with in college. So let me share my screen and we'll get going on the video. All right. And hopefully what you're going to see is the video come up on your screen. Can somebody give me a thumbs up there to make sure? Okay, great. Again, getting to college, we're going to do this particular lecture is going to be on accommodations and modifications. Now, we have this set up for our student class, and so we have learning objectives. Learn the difference between accommodations and modifications, and how that access and supports can help them succeed in college. What are accommodations and modifications? Well, these are such important definitions, so important so that I'm going to read most of it. It's the same curriculum, but a different way to access that curriculum. In other words, the students get support, maybe adjustments, maybe some changes on how they access the material, but the material itself doesn't change. It's just accommodated. So they use a different means for access. And here's an example: extra time for exams, right? Or maybe using a calculator for a math exam, extended time, quiet rooms, things like that. Same exact exam as everybody else in the course, whatever it might be, whether that's high school or whether that's college. It's the same exam, just a different way that's appropriate for what the student needs for them to use that, right? Modifications. Modification is a change. It's a different curriculum, a different altered set of exams. Maybe the amount of test questions change. So you might have 50 test questions that everyone in the class is taking. A modification for a student might be just 25 questions. Or again, a shorter assignment, right? And we ask the student which one they use. And we found that most students have a mix of accommodations and modifications, which makes it a little more difficult for the students to tell which one is which and to pull these things apart. But again, accommodation is accommodating your access to the materials. A modification is a change in those materials. The material's different for each student that's modified or receives a modification. So the differences between college and high school. In high school, you have an IEP, right? An individualized education plan. It has modifications. Things change. Students that have an IEP typically have a disability that means they'll only be successful, or they can be successful, when they have that modification. And it's very crucial that they get that, right? What we also have is 504 plans. And 504, we know, is part of the Rehab Act. So 504 really deals with those accommodating factors, not changes, not modifications, but letting maybe someone with dyslexia, have extra time on their test, or maybe reading an audiobook, right? In high school, these things are managed by the team, the IEP team, parents, teachers, specialists, and the individual with disabilities, right? We need to add that in there. Plans may include modified for simple tasks, shortened assignments, special aids, all kinds of things. And this is a legal framework, right? IDA is a law. Section 504 is part of a law. But these things do not transfer to college. Not at all. College is different, right? So the difference between IEPs in high school versus college accommodations can be pretty significant. Curriculum changes do not happen in a college environment unless the student is in a separate, inclusive post-secondary education program. In Wisconsin, there's one that a lot of people know, Edgewood College, right? The Whitewater College. We have systems that are inclusive post-secondary, and they can make modifications, but most colleges work under the 504, the Rehab Act, and they only do accommodations, accessing, tools, right? Extra time, note takers, paraprofessionals, aides, all these things are very different, right? And we're going to talk about all of those things a little more in depth as we go forward. You must have documentation, right? Students must self-identify if they want accommodations. They won't receive any modifications unless they're in an exclusive, inclusive post-secondary education program. But if they were going to, let's say, the University of Wisconsin in Madison, the student needs to identify themselves as having a disability and provide documentation, right? So that could be your IEP, great documentation. That could be your 504. That could be your transition plan for college, right? But colleges do not have to accept that documentation. Of course, medical documentation for your diagnosis, right? We all know that. Colleges don't have to accept that. They don't. But they often do, and especially with the documentation that we're talking about providing. If I just walked into a disability access center, whatever they might be called, they're called various things in different schools, different colleges. If I went to them and said, I really need a lot of extra time on the test because I overslept this week, and I really need some extra time on this test to study, that's not valid accommodation request. Accommodation request goes through the university, it's approved, and then you receive those. You notify the professor. They also know that. Right? So what if you don't have or don't need an accommodation? We've talked with the students, and we have a checklist I'm going to talk about later on. There may be an accommodation you haven't thought about that you might need. College is a new environment, right? You may find instead of being in a class of 10 or 12 or 20 students, you might be in a class of 500, okay? Very different. So we've talked with all the students in the summer camps, the summer camps about what if you need an accommodation, right? And if you didn't ask for it and you didn't think you needed it, maybe you do. So be really careful with those things. We've also talked with the students about what happens when you don't get an accommodation you do need and how you have to be a self-advocate and advocate for yourself, right? So what changes, right? In K-12, K through 12, students have an IEP or a 504 and a team-based decision. Again, in college, 504 doesn't transfer. IEPs are irrelevant. They do not matter. But they provide great documentation, right? But the student absolutely must self-initiate this process of going to the Disability Access Center after they've gotten into college, or maybe even before, to make sure they have prerequisites. The college won't identify them. They won't hunt down the student. They won't walk them through the process. They have to initiate that. Keep in mind, accommodations don't carry over. They have to be re-requested, and letters to your individual professors must be sent every semester. So accommodations aren't standard. You have to ask for them for every semester, and you have to alert your professors to that. You send them an email, right? You must self-identify your disability if you want assistance. There are people with other disabilities and they have to make their case, maybe a hidden disability, maybe they don't have a diagnosis. But either way, you're going to have to self-identify the fact that you have some challenges. I'm going to pull up the accommodations checklist, but in the course, we pull these up and talk with the students about the different accommodations. I'm going to show you 3 different versions of that later on. So this is a shift in responsibility. K through 12, the responsibility is on the school legally to find those students, identify those modifications or accommodations, and to give them to them. In college, it's the student responsibility. Like I said, register with the disability services, submit paperwork, initiate the request. We have a step-by-step worksheet to go through that. Parents, professors, not automatically involved. You're going to have to ask for help when you need it. College communication is between the student and the administration. You're going to find that to be the case in many things with college. Parents, your rights, your ability to understand and access your students' information about their health, how the university communicates with them changes. You do not have the same kinds of automatic communication from the school. Some of these communications you'll have to ask for access. Some of those the student will have to give you. Some of those require planning and documentation. A medical power of attorney, for instance. We're not going to talk about those, but there are legal documents and college waivers. Sometimes the colleges have waivers where you can sign to get information and stuff. FERPA, whatever the acronym stands for, it's not really important, but it protects their privacy. We know that there are ways to protect privacy. Your child is an adult when they're in college, 9 times out of 10, and because, unless they're under guardianship, you're still going to have their privacy protected and you're going to have to request as parents that information, right? An inclusive program, an IPSC, they're going to provide more support for the students in that way, simply because they don't follow the exact same rules and they're inclusive. So what are some common accommodations? Note-taking. That's one that everyone talks about, and it's true. Note-taking is often and has often been a wonderful way for students to request accommodation and support them. However, with technology and AI changing the landscape, many universities are saying, hey, just use an AI. You can tape this and it'll transcribe it for you. Now that's fine, but we've talked a lot in class and with some other folks about how some of these AIs, note takers, some of these tools aren't very good, or maybe they're not perfect for the student. You've got to test these things. You got to be careful. If the university says, nope, we don't provide note takers anymore, you must use a program, then you need their help, and the Access Center can help you with the program they think is best. You might even have 2 or 3 different ones that might fit your needs. Extra time, extra exams in private, quiet rooms, assistive technology, computer use, accessibility. Early registration for courses can be really, really helpful because then you know and can meet your schedule. So if there's a course, let's say one of the ones at the University of Texas was film history of the film industry. Very, very popular course. People struggled to get into that course unless they had some kind of preferential registration. In that case, it was usually that they were seniors or juniors. This could really help you a lot. Language substitutions. If you speak another language, in all likelihood, you can get those textbooks and tests and other things translated for you. Screen readers. We had a long conversation about how one student found screen readers on books, even though they can read, very, very useful for them. Now, that was an accommodation that they didn't realize they needed, but it was something that was very useful. Housing modifications. We know that single accessible rooms or accessible rooms, period, are very hard to come by in college campuses, especially those that are older. But having an accessible living accommodation may be exactly what a person needs if they use a wheelchair and maybe they can't get onto the 2nd or 3rd floor. Some of these colleges don't even have elevators, or they only have a service elevator they don't let everyone use. Okay, let's talk about service animals. Most universities will allow a service animal, but it needs to be a trained, documented service animal, not an emotional support animal. Let me say that again, not an emotional support animal. Colleges typically limit that, and they may limit that in the classroom as well. They cannot limit you on a trained, documented service animal. They cannot. That is absolutely illegal. But you can't bring your emotional support peacock, which is a horrible example, but apparently somebody did that. They brought a peacock on a plane. I don't know how you do that, but that is not an animal that is a documented support and service animal. It's an emotional support animal. But some universities are realizing this can be very helpful for students, and they're allowing things like rabbits, rodents, mice, things like that, hamsters. Some universities allow that in the dorm rooms. So it'll be up to your university, but we need to stress that, again, service animals get preferential treatment, and it can always be in the classroom. Don't let anybody tell you they can't. All right. So let me go back here real quick. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up, stop sharing this, and I'm going to share a couple of other resources just to show you some of the accommodations that you can use. And we're going to start with this one. There we go. This is a long checklist based on 504 plans. All or some of these accommodations may be available. Some of the colleges don't do these things. Most of them will if you can make a good enough case. Again, we see the number one thing, extended time on exams. Accommodation, not a modification. They're not going to modify the exam in college unless you're in an inclusive program, which is a very different set of circumstances. Mainstream college, if you're there, you can get an accommodation for extra time, extended time. However, you're not going to get a different exam than everyone's taking. Distract and reduce, separate locations, using a calculator for math. I would have loved to have been able to do this in school. It's very fun, very helpful. Spell check, grammar aids on written exams. Possibly, you might need to be careful about that. We know that in the college environment, the use of AI and spell check and grammar can be considered the use of AI. Spell check and grammar sometimes can be considered that, depending on the tool you're using, and you need to make sure that that's okay with your professor. Alternate formats, large type, reduce course loads. That's a very big one. We talked about pacing a lot with the students. Okay, it's extremely important. So as we look through this list, and I'm not going to go over all these things, if anyone out there that's on this presentation is interested, just email us at info@gettingtocollege.org. You'll see that in the Facebook posting where you found this meeting. Let us know, and I'm happy to send you a copy. Sign language interpreters, absolutely. CART services, if you know what those are, which can be real-time captioning, descriptive services. All kinds of things for executive functioning, for mobility, for housing, for health, right? Some students have medications. Maybe they need a refrigerator in their room, and the policy is not to have them. You can probably get one if you can document that. And there's a whole list of other things. This is one of the sheets that we have that we can use as a checklist for the students. We also have let me stop sharing this one. And here we go. This is a more concise list. Again, it starts off with extended time, but this is a group of accommodations that are a little more succinct and that we think students will actually find out. Modified assignments, that's what this said on this list online. The reason I'm bringing this up is we did a search, students and myself, and it said modified assignments and reduced workload. That's not going to happen in college. So be really, really careful, all of you, when you're searching the internet to get the accurate information. There's a reason I made two of these, and I have one that we give to the students and one that I used to show exactly what you can get yourself into trouble with, is not finding out the truth from your accessibility service center on what modifications you can use. Don't go off the internet. Sometimes it's wrong. Okay? Sometimes the internet's wrong. Of course, don't tell the internet I said that. All right, we're going to show you one more thing, which is a college step-by-step. Again, anyone who's interested in receiving these, email us. I'll send it to you. Getting to college stuff is free for everyone. Just need to be able to get it to you. Here's a step-by-step list. Research the college of your choice. Gather your documentation on your disability. We've got a list of those things. Submit your accommodation request, right, through your college. Most of these are online. Meet with a disability service coordinator. You're going to meet with somebody in person to discuss these things. Have your documentation, have your list to tell them. You're going to wait for an eligibility decision. You're going to have to request that accommodation every semester. And when you do, then you're going to send letters to each and every professor each semester. They have an online portal, many of them. And so it's a really easy thing to do. You're basically, it's all set up and you can send those letters through the portal. I happen to know that University of Wisconsin La Crosse does have that. And we talked about it recently. It's a really nice system. I think Western Tech does too. They have a really nice system for making it easy on you. But for God's sakes, if you request accommodations, please use them. Talk to your professors. Talk about how to make sure these things work. Accommodations are there to make you successful at school, right? And you need them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be asking for them. Don't ask for accommodations you don't need. However, always ask for accommodations you think you might need, like extra testing, extra time on your test, right? Use those accommodations. Find out what worked and what didn't. Make a change request if it's not working. Renew those each semester. So this is a nice little checklist. And that's basically it. Accommodations, modifications, only accommodations carry over from the K-12 environment into the college environment. However, there are modifications that students have gotten that if they're documented properly can lead to accommodations in school. So don't get these two confused. Don't think that they're interchangeable. They are not. And it's very crucial that our students know that if they really need heavily modified curriculum, an inclusive post-secondary environment is probably best for them. And so we're going to talk through that as we talk about what colleges are good fit. If they just need accommodations, then perhaps they don't need to go into an inclusionary or inclusive post-secondary program. Maybe they can go straight into mainstream college and do well once they use those accommodations. Last note is we've talked to a lot of folks who do accommodations and disability services and supports, and we're finding that only a third of the people that need and could use accommodations are requesting them. A third. So 2/3 of the people that could use extra time, that could use maybe a calculator, maybe they need a quiet room to take a test in. Those basic accommodations that make people successful, only a third of the people that we talk to are accessing that in the colleges. There's a lot of folks who aren't doing that. And this is for everybody. This is not just students with challenges. It's for everyone. If you need the help, ask for it, document it, and use that to be more successful. All right, well, we're going to stop sharing now, and then I'm going to pause the recording. Stop in the share, and I'm going to